Alright, well, we've got two things that arrived today. You know, there's the smile, so this is the top here, where you can see the label, I guess. You know, this makes me think I should just open it this side and sneak them out that way, because, you know, I'm trying not to have the label poke. This one should be a weird package, though, because well, I guess I'm gonna find out whether or not 18 and older. Okay, yeah. 2 shows. Yeah, okay. So I do have. We'll put that there, and so far these look okay to show. This is Pure Mellow Love, which, you know, I can see they're actually released by Kitty Media, which means they are hentai. Yeah, and they do have some fairly provocative backs. It's kind of interesting. I'm actually just looking that image there, and you can tell there's some sort of huge busted themeness that is there, and that actually makes a lot of uncomfortable sense, because if there's one thing I remember about Eiken, and there was a DVD version released of this as well, but I already have the really old one, this show kind of has a problem with characters having grotesquely oversized bagongas, I guess. Like, she's pretty bad. It's like, what in the world? And this isn't to say that people in real life who do have them, you know, bad, but it does not look proportional. But yeah, I hope you kind of understand that, you know, this it's doing whatever it's doing. I mean, if you take a look at that, if you think about it, that just looks like it would cause back problems. I mean, we're not even talking about, like, 2 balloons. Holding something that big in front of you is already kind of tricky as it is, but for them to also be, you know, full of fatty tissue, which, you know, isn't the heaviest thing in the world per se, but that quantity, that's, yeah. I don't know. I just don't see somebody standing with that kind of shoulders kind of squared back sort of thing. I don't know. That's a weird show. Next up, we have Million Arthur? Yeah, Million Arthur. Okay, because the M's there, I don't know. It's like actually a kind of neat title. Interesting. That is not a part of the thing. I can actually feel it with my thumb. I'm wondering. There's 6 in a million. I see this is regions A and B. Well, let's get that off. Interesting. So they look fairly similar, but you can kind of see that there's that there, and it's not there. So they're kind of the same, but they're different. That is strange. Okay, so this is heavy. This feels like it would be almost like a DVD Blu-ray thing, but I see it only says Blu-ray on the front, which makes me think there's actually a good number of discs in here. Not like a super huge amount. But yeah, 4 Blu-ray discs, regions A and B. Yeah, that's an English dub. I have no idea if this is going to be any good or not, but it certainly looks intriguing. Although I must admit that I'm more of a fan of this than that look, but that doesn't necessarily look bad. Just the more I look at this, the more I'm wondering, what the fuck am I even looking at? You know, it's kind of nice that anime can still do that. Even though the anime I'm going to talk about today after this kind of suffers a little bit from that problem, but at least the first episode does, which is all I watched, but let's just finish this up. I think this one's the one I'm kind of curious about. This one looks like a comedy. And I know these can be rather hit or miss, especially since, you know, if it's not my particular style of comedy, then I don't know. But there's something about the way she looks that just makes me think that it doesn't look like it's necessarily the kind I hate. The real question is if it's the kind I like, but let's see. She can unravel the greatest secrets of science, but the mysteries of the boy code have her baffled. I don't know. It might be good. 12 episodes, region A only, but this does have an English dub. So we've got that. Single disc. How clumsy are you, Miss Ueno? It said 12 episodes. Where's the runtime? 180 minutes? Okay, so these are shorter length. Because, you know, 12 times 10 plus 12 times 5 would be 180, right? So it's 15 minutes of things. So they're a half-length episode, but curious. Anyways, here's this week's anime DVD collection update. So, the only new thing I watched was the first episode of The Ones Within. Yeah, The Ones Within. And I had to give it 2 shots, because basically, the way it introduced its characters, I didn't really care for. It just kind of was like, oh, here are all the people going to be sent in, but it kind of felt a little weird and eccentric, which, you know, is kind of a thing that anime is good for, but for me it just didn't sit well. Like, there were certain smirky smiles and edgy people, and it just kind of was like, it felt like I didn't care about the fact that these characters were thinking so highly of themselves per se. It was just, again, I only watched the first episode, so I don't have a lot that I'm talking about with this, but I can say that, you know, it started with that. Then the character who I'm going to call main character, just because he's in the front here, and he did seem to be kind of frontward facing in the show. You know, he's introduced, he sees a girl lying next to him. He's going through steps to kind of check what to do if you find somebody unconscious. And he's not even really in that compromising a position, but she punches him immediately. Which, if any of y'all know, that's just one of those things where it's just like, I already don't like this character. I mean, she got physically aggressive. She didn't even try to figure out her surroundings, and she actually did apologize about it near the end of the episode, but it's kind of too late, because she's been kind of cunty. And I wish I could say that she was the only bad character in this, but the other characters are just sort of like, okay, this guy is confrontational for the sake of being confrontational. I don't necessarily mean like he's doing that to be confrontational. I'm saying that he's written that way to be confrontational. It just kind of feels like this strange cast of characters have been thrown at us, but we're actually not really given a reason to kind of feel that they would be strange and eccentric. In fact, and maybe the problem here is just that, like, my own perception of streamers or Let's Players or whatever is kind of whatever it is, but none of them really strike me as living up to an eccentric stereotype to the degree with which they could be an anime character that is this bonkers. And, like, you had one of these guys that's just like, oh, well, he's in the Shogun era stuff, but that doesn't really explain why he's, like, skilled enough to kind of do this. It feels like the show's just kind of a little random, a little directionless. Like, there's ideas, and it could get better beyond the first episode, but I didn't give the first episode a second try until pretty much really late last night, and today I don't have enough time to watch more. So it's weird. It might be okay. I really did like the main characters, just overall very positive demeanor, I guess. Like, I'm not sure that it's necessarily wrong, but I did kind of feel like it was kind of hard to tell earlier on that he was that kind of character. So maybe there's a little bit missing there. Overall, I'm not sure what I think about it, and I would definitely have to give it more than the first episode to give it a fair shot, but given it's the unfair shot I've taken, that's, I guess, some of my thoughts on it. It's random, weird. I'm not sure that it's a high enough priority for me to continue, especially since the two really new things that are non-hentai that arrived today, those kind of have me intrigued. And I guess part of the reason I was easily distracted by this was ReZero, which of course I've seen before, but I had to box it up. Basically, with my Friday friend, we've been watching it again, and or rather, I've been watching again. He's been watching it for the first time, and I probably even mentioned some of the thoughts, but I kind of feel like I had some really good insights, different than when I first watched it for the second half, because I decided to, we only watched the first 2 episodes of it, but I kind of just continued on, because first it was able to be on in the background, and then it was just like, I'm kind of enjoying stuff. So this does kind of introduce some of the flaws for ReZero, but at the same time, watching it, the flaws, I feel, don't necessarily bring it down enough to make it unwatchable, and they may just be kind of critiques as opposed to flaws that make it bad. But these are things that also people could have just, watched about it, and they felt, no, I just can't watch this show anymore. So, the second half is particularly notable because starting it is kind of hard. And I think I got some really good insight as to what's really going wrong there. A part of it is that it sort of feels like there's this character change, sort of. And it's hard to say that it necessarily feels like a different character, but it just sort of feels like character assassin-y sort of stuff. And I think what's going wrong here is this show, one of the strengths of this show becomes its weakness when it makes missteps, but it handles its missteps very well. In this case, in the first half of, and this is only season 1, in the first half of season 1, you get actually really good perspective from the point of view of our main character. You don't just see him there, you also get some good access to his internal monologue so that we're aware of facts that the other characters maybe aren't. And sometimes the other characters actually are. Like, there's this point where he's putting on a straight face and he's trying harder, but he's not really holding up very well, and we first get insight into that by other characters kind of mentioning that his mind is in a turbulent state, and then we get the insight from his point of view. And so the point here is that we get a lot of insight into the kind of character, the kind of person he is, and we kind of know that there's these situations where it's like, if he were a bad person, or maybe even a good person put in questionable circumstances, we could understand why certain events would cause him to maybe not make as good of a choice. For example, when he finds out the villagers are in trouble, even though he knows that he's probably going to die, we get really good insight into how he handles that, and it's like he doesn't even think about it. He just knows. He doesn't think of the people around him as disposable. He doesn't think of the people around him as tools for his own conquest. He actually cares and thinks about them. So we kind of have that, and when you combine that with the fact that we also see that given how much he's given how much of a recluse he probably was in Japan, and given that he does demonstrate naivete. He is surprisingly well adjusted and actually has a very refreshing outlook on a lot of the events. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of people really like about the show is it's refreshing ideas on the concepts, it's refreshing execution of the concepts. It's good execution. It's great. It's so when they start this second half and they kind of have them do and say some things, they feel a little out of character, and it kind of reminds me a little bit about the end of Breaking Bad, because I get the feeling that near the end of Breaking Bad they needed to have Walter White just definitely be an evil person. Oh no, I did everything for selfish reasons, when we had a lot of insight into before, and we know that there was an element of selfishness there, but to say that he was only doing it for selfish reasons is not quite right. And I do believe a bit of that has to do with the creators of Breaking Bad not really liking how much people liked Walter White, and also really hating that people hated Skylar so much. Skylar? The wife. To give it this a complete fair shot analysis, I've heard certain things, but I should really rewatch the show from the beginning just to kind of verify that I guess I agree with those ideas. But the entire point was, I think they reached a point where they just kind of had to say, okay, we as writers, we have to make him a bad guy and not just this morally gray person. We can't have people. So it felt like the ending of Breaking Bad kind of performed a character assassination on the main character. And, again, it feels kind of similar to here, where I think they understood the concept that they needed him to start becoming overconfident, and they needed him to have a fallout, and they needed him to kind of come up with an even more refreshing. But it's weird because it kind of just feels like he just became more of what we would have thought that he already was in terms of a character, but the show kind of had to make him go down this dark route, and there's a weakness there. Basically, one of the flaws of the show is we are given such intricate and intimate insight into the characters that I think little writing mishaps like this just feel worse. Now, the good news is that it's really only tricky for 1 or 2 episodes, but it's once you've already watched it before, it's actually not as bad. It's just you roll your eyes, but where the character has to go from there gets right back on track with what the series was already kind of doing. Just, now with this different, it needs to make him grow by making this the worst. So like, if you have a 4-act structure, I think usually the 3rd act, and that would be, like the 3rd quarter of a series, the 3rd act is usually when things are at their worst, and then the triumphant part comes from part 4. And in that regard, ReZero actually excels. It does a great job of building itself back up after what I consider to be a misstep in the writing, where I think they probably could have done it better. But because the problem is, he has some self-loathing, and some of his behaviorism is about overcoming that, and that actually makes sense. But the problem is that he's too well adjusted for it to be as problematic as the show is trying to present itself, which is also kind of a problem because his ability to recover from that is a little too easy and convenient for him to not have already been close to that in the first place. It's not like people can just suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to be a better person, and they're a better person. They have to struggle for it, and his struggle while there is not really as much as a real person would have to. So, it's kind of one of those interesting things, but overall, I think it works perfectly fine. Okay, they could have done that one part better somehow, but what happened works. It's good. It was actually very entertaining to rewatch the second half of it, especially once I got past those parts. And the good news for my friend is he's past those parts. So after this is where, the series is going to get back on track. And I guess there's a weakness in that it feels like there's more stuff that could have been connected up with near the end here, but didn't, and whatever. Anyways, the other problem with the show, and this one I think is a little less of a flaw. I'm going to call it perfect characters, but you have to understand here, these aren't characters that are perfect people. These are characters that are way too correct for the situation for which this is needed. And I'm not talking about things like these interesting ideas it comes up with for handling certain problems, but rather these rather notable scenes that are actually very touching and exactly what we wanted for our main... I'm trying to remember... Why am I having trouble remembering names? Anyways, they're perfect, but it feels like it teeters on the edge of pandering. I mean, I've mentioned before how I kind of have problems like that. Like, one of my big problems with Stargate universes are like, oh, well, I guess a lot of the really young adult, teenage, older demographic like this. So we're going to have a guy who, you know, just played video games and now he's a part of the Stargate program because he happened to solve an alien math thing. And that feels, while it could be plausible, it just feels very pandery. Like, they didn't need to do it, and they really, really didn't need to do that. And this isn't anywhere near as bad as that. But it's mostly, I don't know. And there's some of the most notable scenes as well. And this is, I guess, really just the series, as much as I love the scenes, also, you know, kind of brushing a little bit past my cynicism, saying, yeah, people just don't understand each other that well in real life. Even though, you know, that's exactly what we wanted to see happen. And, you know, that's a weird thing, but it's still a flaw where I could see somebody going into this and just saying, no, nobody would understand him that well. I know they would want to, and I know they would put effort in, but yeah. So I wish I could be more specific. I'm trying to talk about this series without, you know, talking about very specific scenes so that people don't go in there expecting stuff. But at the same time, just trying to give general ideas. So if you've never seen ReZero, again, you know, you should probably hear this and say, okay, it's worth checking out. It's definitely worth checking out. I'm trying to think if there's anything I would want to say to anybody if I was just saying it, but I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. But it was kind of interesting watching it and getting some of that insight into my feelings on the show, I guess. Let's see. I guess there's nothing else I would comment about it. And was there a second season? I do worry about what a second season could entail, because what we have here with season 1 would actually be a good concrete thing, because season 1 would definitely be a character story arc for our main character, not necessarily learning to become like a superhero or anything like that, but really kind of more about him becoming a better person and setting himself up to have better relationships with people by the end of the series, I would say. Like, you can kind of feel there is a happy ending that is reached. It's not like a conclusion. There's a lot of unresolved things in terms of, you know, the overarching, okay, what about this? And then there's other characters he hasn't interacted enough with, and other characters whose other goals haven't completed. But in terms of a story about his character arc in this slice of time, it feels pretty complete. I'd be very concerned about a season 2, and I guess, you know, there's one or there isn't one, simply because either we had somebody that was a directorial, maybe not genius, but master, who managed to keep season 1 focused on what would make season 1 enjoyable in and of itself, or the manga author did that. But then I would worry that the same little chink in the armor that would be, okay, I don't feel like this is how the character actually is, and I don't think he would actually say something like that. So that little chink in the armor could just be that, you know, maybe as good as everything else is, some of it starts weakening, and maybe everything past what's this season 1 isn't quite as good. And that wouldn't be the first time, but, you know, I have those concerns. But yeah, outside of that, I don't know. I'm mostly looking forward to playing Terraria tonight with my brother on the stream. Which hopefully this video is actually up before that starts, although I can't say that we'll begin doing anything awesome. Because, you know, we're playing Terraria and we just killed the wall of flesh to enter hard mode. You know, that was, of course, not a particularly notable feat because my character is really overpowered right now. They should be pretty deep into hard mode. So that'll be interesting now that we're in hard mode. But the first thing we have to do is gain control of the Crimson and the Hallow. And honestly, I really enjoy excuses that allow me to just use my overpowered tools like crazy to just help engineer stuff. So I guess I'm looking forward to that. Basically, we're just drilling holes to prevent the Hallow and the Crimson from spreading much further. I wonder if I'll be doing other things, but don't need to worry about that stuff too much. So, yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything I would cover. Y'all, have a nice week.